Welcome back to the last introductory lesson of digital communications for salespeople. What we're going to do now is start getting into the nuts and bolts of how these media concepts translate into the basic context of selling on LinkedIn. Take a moment and think about the different ways you can interact with the LinkedIn platform. You can send direct messages, you can comment, you can react with a like, or create content. All these tools are different mediums of communication. All these different mediums exist within one social media platform. And just like the light bulb had unintended consequences on how we perceive the world, each of these unique mediums have their own subtle impacts to the way that we perceive one another, develop relationships, and ultimately sell online. Like I've said in the previous video, it's not only about what you say, it's about how you say it. The form of communication you choose influences the message that's being received. Remember how I spoke about being aware of the content you're consuming and the ways in which its delivery makes you feel? These are the subtle experiences we need to pay attention to if we want to give off a good impression online. A perfect way to illustrate this is with an example we've all experienced of misinterpreting a digital message. Do you remember a time when you sent an email that in hindsight came across a little aggressive and blunt? At the time you sent it, you were in good spirits and perfectly happy, but that feeling didn't necessarily translate to the receiver. This is the perfect example of how our perceptions of a medium like email holds more weight than the message itself. To understand how we're going to apply this to LinkedIn, I want to go back briefly to the electric light. The light itself is pure information. Until it's used for something, it's a medium without a message. So the electric light in and of itself doesn't tell you anything. But when it's used to illuminate a surgical procedure, you get a very different message than when it's used to illuminate a rock concert. Two very different messages. So the question now becomes, how is that light bulb being used? What is it actually communicating? On LinkedIn, a simple comment can be used to congratulate, to criticize, to support, or to network. Each of these examples completely changes the meaning of the comment depending on the user's intention. Even something as simple as a like could have multiple interpretations. So let's unpack this idea of the medium in the context of LinkedIn. Take, for example, a direct message. A direct message is a more personal, private way to connect with someone. This format shapes the message. You're reaching out directly one-to-one, creating a sense of intimacy and immediacy that you don't necessarily get with a public comment. The medium of a DM adds weight to the message itself, regardless of what the actual message says. Think about it like this. When you receive a DM, it feels like you're being singled out, spoken to directly. It demands your attention in a way that a comment on a post doesn't. Because it feels more personal, it suggests a level of importance that requires further action to be taken. But it's not just about the factor of intimacy in this situation. A DM offers you a degree of control that public comments don't. With a DM, you're shaping your intended audience by choosing exactly who sees your message. This in turn shapes how the message is perceived and interpreted. Understanding this, it can be used as a much more strategic form of communication when you're reaching out to a prospect. On the other end of the communication spectrum, you have the ability to comment on a post. This is way more public. You're adding your voice to a larger conversation and you have a greater potential to communicate with a much wider audience. The public nature of a comment influences how we craft our message and again, how it's interpreted by others. With the understanding that people are observing the comments, we're much more likely to be aware of our tone and our language. For some, this simple fact might even make you feel fearful about being judged, and that's okay. Commenting can genuinely have this feeling like you're performing to an audience on stage. And that awareness shapes our message too. The more you understand how to read the medium, the more you'll be able to recognize the difference between someone who's being authentic and someone who's not, and vice versa, how you choose to come across online. From my experience, I would suggest just leaning into who you are. If you're a laid-back person, be laid back. If you're an uptight person, be uptight. The more you practice being yourself online, the easier it will become. Social media is a complex social landscape. It takes understanding to learn how we interpret it as an extension of ourselves, and understandably, it doesn't always feel natural if you're not frequently using it yourself. Now we understand some of the more obvious communication methods, direct messages, comments, and I've purposely left out posting, but I do want to touch on reactions. The likes, the claps, the insightful emojis. If you thought about it simply, they could just be interpreted like a shorthand form of communication. But while they may seem small, they do carry their own weight in the context of communications on LinkedIn. Think about it like this. With a reaction, you're reducing complex ideas and emotions down to a single reaction, and that is a powerful compression of meaning that can be interpreted in several ways. Each reaction carries its own set of connotations. Even a thumbs up can have multiple meanings depending on the context. For example, a thumbs up on a post announcing a job loss could be interpreted as heartless. Those tiny little reactions matter, especially if you're trying to build strong, long-term relationships on the platform. I hope this is illustrating the nuances that go into networking on a platform like LinkedIn. It's about navigating a complex web of communication styles and understanding the subtle messages within each medium so that you can better leverage the tools to serve your purpose. We now understand that a like can hold different meanings, multiple meanings depending on the context. It's a great way to highlight all the little nuances that go into the way we communicate online. And LinkedIn is a whole communications toolkit. Each tool has its own purpose and its own unique message. So let me illustrate how a simple reaction can hold more meaning in a nuanced interaction. Take, for example, how you'd normally first respond to a post. A simple like, most probably. That initial reaction can set the tone for further interaction. If you just like a post without commenting, that's saying something very different than if you react to a post and leave a detailed response. That minute nuance can have a very different influence on how others perceive you, engage with you, and ultimately how you stand out in their feed. This is the strategic aspect. You're using those different communication methods to shape someone else's impression of your online persona. Every little like, every little comment, it all adds up to the bigger picture you're trying to portray to someone online. Those small interactions within the larger context shapes the way we are perceiving the real person and the messages they're communicating from the other side of the network cable. That's why it's so important to be intentional with our interactions. One way to practice this is before you hit that like button, you should ask yourself some questions. What am I trying to say? What am I trying to achieve? The key here is to be conscious of the choices you're making. There's nothing strategic about randomly liking posts, but there is something strategic in asking yourself why you're liking this post. In other words, the strategy lies in being intentional. Think about your interactions like you're building your digital persona. Every like, every comment, every connection request, you're building your digital persona brick by brick, and the impressions you're giving off matter when your intent is to build stronger connections. Remind yourself that you're not just a passive consumer of media. Start by being aware, intentional, and actively contributing to the medium itself.